Good morning. My name is Mrs. Zeke, and this is 5th and 6th grade English. Today, we're going to be talking about feudalism in ancient Europe and Japan. What you'll need to follow along with me this morning is a paper and pen or something to write with. I'd love for you to be able to take some notes along the way. So let's take 1 minute and grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and let's get started. Before we dive into what feudalism is, we need to understand the definition. You define feudalism as a social system that existed in Europe during the Middle Ages in which people worked and fought for nobles who gave them protection and the use of land in return. What are we talking about? I always like to use a visual to help with this understanding. So let's take a look at this pyramid. You notice at the top you have your king. Everybody underneath him seems to be having an arrow leading to the king. As you scroll down each level, you notice who directly reports to the king and who they serve. So you have the military aid and the loyalty lords who serve the king. And these are considered the vassals to the king. The peasants are lowlier, and you can see them on each level. As they work together, each system helps the other get the supplies and information they need for the continuation of their society. So if you look down one more level, you can see that the lords and the military provide food, protection, and shelter, while the knights provide that homage and military service to the king's aid and the lords who then serve the king. If we take it to that bottom level, you notice that the knights in the military service provide shelter, protection, and food again, while the peasants are working in the farm to provide this food and tend to the land, as well as pay rent to the lords who serve the king and make the system go round and round. This is something that it was used in ancient Europe and Japan for a while under a man named Charlemagne. Before we get to him, let's take a look at a fun fact. During the medieval times, no one referenced this as feudal. This term feudal was later developed by historians to label this specific time and part of our history so we could understand the societal practices. So why would Europe and Japan adapt such a practice? Well, it goes back to the 10th to 15th century in what the historians like to call the Middle Ages. Here's our guy, Charlemagne. It's interesting to think back to this time period. It all began with him. After Charlemagne died, his empire broke into several pieces. These different places make their own kingdoms, complete with castles, horses, knights, and a lot of swords. People fought over land and each other's property. In the late Middle Ages, feudalism began to decline as kings began to grow more powerful, partly as a result of the Crusades. Global trade increased and more people started to move to towns which were outside of the control of the feudal lords. With the wealth that came into these royal treasuries during the Age of Exploration, kings began financing their own armies and allowed nobles to pay money instead of raising their own men. While feudalism began to decline significantly between 14 and 1700, some elements of feudalism remained in Europe into the modern era. In 1789, the French National Assembly formally abolished the legal privileges of the nobility in the early stages of the French Revolution. Serfdom continued in Russia until a reforming czar abolished it in the 1860s. How do we think of feudalism today? We don't have a king. We aren't split up into different classes. But you may have played a game where it uses such things. Know how to play chess? You should absolutely learn if you don't know how. And as you learn, or if you know, think, who's the weakest player. It's the king. Why? He is so dependent on all of the other players on the board to keep him safe. Sound familiar? This is feudalism. It has been a pleasure to be here with you today. I hope you go out there and play a game of chess and think about this idea of feudalism, and I look forward to seeing you next week.